Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and we're back here today with another edition of Against the Odds. So before we talk about this week's deck, which I'm calling Near Death Karma, gotta talk a little bit about how we ended up with this deck. So, as you know, last week we didn't have a voting for Against the Odds. Instead, I wanted to do a special edition. My plan was to do a deck that had, about 200 copies of Shadowborn Apostle, 4 copies of Runescar Demon to get with the Shadowborn Apostle, and then Battle of Wits to get with the Runescar Demon, and since our deck would be so huge, we play the Battle of Wits, and we win because Battle of Wits says if you have 200 or more cards in your library at the beginning of your upkeep, you win the game. So that was the idea. But then I ran into 2 problems. First off, I realized it is ridiculously hard to get 200 copies of the same card on Magic Online. Most bots only allow you to buy 4 copies per day, so I was going to have to go to like 50 different bots or more and buy 4 copies from each of them and leave a bunch of credit with each of them, and it was way harder than I imagined. Secondly, I tested a smaller version of the deck just to see, because technically you should be able to just scale it down and figure out how, with a 60 card deck, and figure out how easy or likely it is to actually get 6 copies of Shadowborn Apostle on the battlefield. And it is not very likely. I don't think we probably ever would have pulled off the combo, because any removal our opponent has puts us down a copy of Shadowborn Apostle, so it is really hard to get 6 copies just naturally by drawing them. There might be a way to use Rally the Ancestors and mill a bunch in your graveyard and get them back all at once, but just naturally drawing them is not very possible. So I ended up scrapping that idea for those 2 reasons, and said, well, I got a free week, what do I want to do? I can do anything I want. So we ended up with Near Death Karma, a deck built around, the key card is Near Death Experience. So Near Death Experience is one of those cool alternate win condition cards. It's from Rise of the Eldrazi. It's a 6 mana white enchantment. 4 of the mana to cast, or 3 of the mana to cast it as white. And it says, at the beginning of your upkeep, if you have exactly 1 life, you win the game. So Near Death Experience obviously does nothing a huge percentage of the time. 5 mana do nothing. However, if you have exactly 1 life and it's exactly your upkeep, it does everything and you win the game on the spot. So the trick is figuring out not only how to get yourself to 1 life, which is obviously the challenge, but also how to survive at 1 life until your upkeep, because once you get to 1 life, you're in a pretty fragile state. And pretty much anything from your opponent, from an attacking creature to an Electrolyze to a Lightning Bolt, is going to lose the game on the spot for you. So it's a little tricky to build around, but I think we came up with a pretty good plan. So first off, we have Worship, and Worship reads like a combo with Near Death Experience. 4 mana, white enchantment. If you control a creature, damage that would reduce your life total to 1, or to less than 1, reduces it to 1 instead. So Worship basically makes sure that if you would ever go below 1 life, instead you go to 1 life. So with a Worship and a creature and a Near-Death Experience, your goal is just to take lethal damage. Because lethal damage, instead of killing you, is going to put you to 1 life, and then that 1 life at your upkeep will have you win the game with Near-Death Experience. So that was the first card I went to. But then I thought, well, the problem is, once our opponent realizes what's happening, they'll probably just stop attacking us at like 10 life or something, and until they can get rid of one of our enchantments, and then what do? How do we win the game? So I figured we had to have a way to actually deal damage to ourselves to get us down to 1 life for those cases where our opponent stops attacking us. So the sweetest way to do this, I think, is the combination of Karma and Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth. So Karma, another 4 mana white enchantment, says during each player's upkeep, Karma does 1 point of damage to that player for each swamp he or she has in play. So at your upkeep, you take damage equal to the number of swamps you have. Urborg makes all lands a swamp in addition to their other types. So with a Urborg and a Karma, each player on their upkeep is going to take damage equal to the number of lands they control. So if we have a Worship and a creature and the Karma Urborg lock going on, Karma will drain us down, but it'll never put us below 1 life. It'll drain us down to 1 life, and then on our upkeep, we can win the game with Near Death Experience. It can also just win the game if we have higher life than our opponent by draining our opponent to death from their lands. So that is the main combo. Get a Near Death Experience on the battlefield, get Worship and a creature on the battlefield to keep us alive. Karma and Urborg are life total down till we win with near-death experience. Obviously, with Worship, you have to have creatures, so our creature package is pretty sweet. First off, Calcite Snapper and Wall of Denial. They're just shroud creatures with high toughness, which means apart from a true wrath, like a Wrath of God or Supreme Verdict, they're pretty much not going to die. They'll just sit on the battlefield, and we'll always have a creature for Worship to make sure that we don't go past 1 life, and we can eventually win with near-death experience. So that's why they're in the deck. They're pretty much defensive creatures that are just going to sit out there, sit out there, sit out there until we can pull off our combo. Bitter Blossom was a sweet one. I was really excited for figuring out Bitter Blossom in this deck. Not only does Bitter Blossom provide a constant stream of creatures for Worship and attackers as kind of a plan B to win the game, we can just make a bunch of fairy rogues and attack with them, but it also drains our life. So when we don't have the karma, in theory, we can play a Bitter Blossom and just drain our life total down 1 life at a time until we get to 1 and win with near-death experience. And then Shambling Vent, it is a dual land. It is also a creature when we want it to be. So if we have to activate it in response to a lightning bolt to turn on our Worship. And it has lifelink, which is actually pretty sweet because while we want to be losing life, not gaining life, if we don't have the Worship package going on, we want to be able to manipulate our life total to make sure we get to exactly 1 life. And sometimes gaining a couple life will help us manipulate our life total in a more effective way for that goal of getting to exactly 1 life. So that's our creatures. Our spells, pretty basic. Inquisition, just a discard spell, only 1 copy. Thoughtseize is a sweet one. You probably notice most modern decks play the opposite split, where they're playing more Inquisitions than Thoughtseizes. Well, in our deck, since we're trying to get to 1 life, Thoughtseize is just strictly better because we actually want to lose the 2 life. It's another way that we can lose 2 life to get down to 1 life to trigger our near-death experience. And we can also always target ourselves if we have to, as a way, like if our opponent has a Leyline of Sanctity, just as a way to lose that 2 life, if that's going to help us reach our goal of triggering near-death experience. Path, simply a removal spell, most efficient one in the format. Idyllic Tutor is pretty key. Idyllic Tutor, basically 3 mana, searches for an enchantment, puts it in your hand. Since our whole combo is built around enchantments, near-death experience is an enchantment, Worship is an enchantment, and Karma is an enchantment, it can search for any of those pieces of our combo. So it's just very good for finding and putting our pieces together. Mana base wise, we have 4 Flooded Strands and 4 Polluted Deltas, so 8 fetch lands in totals. We have 3 Watery Graves, 3 Godless Shrines, and 1 Hallowed Fountain, so a bunch of shock lands. And those cards in particular are key because they're another way we can manipulate our life total. That's why we're playing way more shock lands than a typical deck, 7 shock lands. We still have a few basics, 1 of each to avoid Blood Moon and such, but we want to have the option to fetch, shock ourselves, take 3 damage, because it helps drain us down to 1 life for our near-death experience. Then, of course, the Urborg and the Shambling Vents. We already talked about those, but I wanted to stick them somewhere on the slide, just so you knew they were part of the mana base. Sideboard-wise, have a Duress. We have 2 Inquisitions of Kozlik. We have a Repeal, 2 Dispels, counters an instant, 2 Negates, counters a non-creature spell, 2 Disenchants, hits an artifact or enchantment, a couple of Supreme Verdicts for Wrathing, a Detention Sphere, and 2 copies of Stony Silence. Also, I forgot to add it on the slide for some reason, but we also have in the main deck 2 copies of Greater Oromancy. It's a 2 mana enchantment that says, basically, enchantments you control have Shroud or Hexproof. So we can get a Greater Oromancy, and it just makes sure that our opponent can't use some spell, I don't know, a Reclamation Sage, Quasali Pride Mage, to kill our Karmas and Worships and near-death experiences. They have to use a spell to kill the Greater Oromancy first, and then they would have to target our other enchantments afterwards. Anyway, so that's the deck. I think it's pretty sweet. I have no idea if it's going to actually work very effectively. We're looking to resolve 4 mana and 5 mana enchantments, which is pretty expensive in the world of Modern. But I think it's pretty sweet, and I think it's going to be really fun. I'm going to say the odds of us winning are, let's go 20. Well, here's the thing. The odds of us winning with near-death experience, we need a lot of pieces to pull off that combo. So I think the odds of that are pretty low. Maybe 20 or even less, maybe 15%. However, 4 Bitter Blossoms, backed up by Thoughtseize and Inquisition, is pretty sweet. So we will probably get some draws where we just go like discard into Bitter Blossom, and beat down with fairy tokens and win the game like we're some really weird black-white token deck. So I think overall, I'm going to say 25%. 1 out of every 4 games we win. But I think our chances of winning with our wacky combo of near-death experience, Karma, Worship, and Urborg is even lower than that. So I think some of our wins will just be these random beatdown wins where we're attacking with Calcite Snappers and Fairy Rogue tokens. Anyway, I think it's going to be fun to play, and I'm really excited for it. So make sure to check out the article on mtggoldfish.com. That is where you will find the poll, so you can vote for next week's Against the Odds deck. We have tons of other great content, decks, prices, metagame strategy, pretty much anything and everything you could want related to Magic the Gathering. And if you enjoyed the video for Near-Death Karma in Modern on Against the Odds, make sure to click that subscribe button that's going to pop up on the bottom of your screen. It will keep you up to date on all the latest and greatest in video content from mtggoldfish.com. Anyway, thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed the videos, and I will talk to you soon.